Let's get started on this first one. An ash tree has compound leaves, or they have a compound leaf. It's a question of how you answer it. The many leaves share a stem, a lifeline to the branch. They can live alone if they need to. A compound leaf confers advantages in air exchange. They mitigate damages. Animal ravage, storm damage, the survivors can rebuild. Under the bark, the bug scavenges. No leaf type could do shit for that. So this is the trees named in this poem or in this book are, for the most part, ash trees. I grew up in Detroit. One of the places I read a lot about. I have a poem about the 3 ash trees that I kind of watched die as a child, because this is where the emerald ash borer first was discovered in Detroit. And then I came to Toronto, after 5 years in New Orleans, and discovered that it was just slowly coming there, and now it's all the way up in Nova Scotia. So it's like these things, this phenomenon of just unfathomable amounts of ash trees dying. I think it's like 30,000 in Toronto or something alone. Yeah, it's just, yeah. So a weird thing that happened was that since I've been living with these sorts for so long, a couple summers ago, the dead ash trees started speaking to me. It's in the year of 2018, and so I'm going to read a couple of the poems that came out of that. The voices began on a Greyhound bus between Windsor and London. I've taken this route so many times, I know each windmill's name. Hank. So many in Ontario are dead. This trip, it's plain. Each dead ash tree now has a name. Doom. And in the borer's wake, the dead speak to me. So I'm just going to kind of skip around. Some of these are trees by the 401. This one is one that's in Toronto. There's a few city ash, so some of them are still kind of hanging on. This one features something called a slack line. If you know, the slack line is something where that's like a tightrope that you tie between 2 points and do like a tightrope walk on it. And people do this in Trinity Bellwoods Park a lot because they're super hip. But as you imagine, the trees aren't that much into it. So this is Dying City Park ash. Fuck slack lines. Some bullshit pantomime. You act like it's a pastime and not an act of fashion. Whoops. There's people nearby in the crowded park and they cheered weird. You managed not to fart or fall. What a thrill. And then all the people chill, relaxed now and impressed. Oh, Prince of Bellwoods, man-bunned knight of very low tightrope walks, pulling with all your body weight against the stalks of a maple and an oak. Here, friend, for you, a curse. You will awake one day, a fat raccoon hung by a leash around your shoulders, and you, without retreat, must lug around this small urban bear everywhere. So Chris was mentioning earlier how sassy the ash trees are, and they are mostly, but they started to get a little bit more, there started to be some subtlety in their message. This one is at the Elora Gorge. Elora Gorge is about an hour north of Toronto. There's some rapids that running through like this kind of limestone gully that's really cool. So it's a place where people go like tubing. There's some rapids. But when you're a tuber, you have like no control over where you're going. So this is well, I guess it's in the title. The ash hanging over the Elora Gorge, still mostly alive, as the poet tubes past. Tubers are tolerable, floating helpless. You forget you hate them. You get that they're like winged seed pods moved in the wind. You reject that this redeems them. Don't hate, though, even slackliners, harvesters, the wood floor walkers, which is all of them all. The one who hears us floats by me. He's learned to steer a bit, or thinks he has, with his feet. Really, he's just tiring himself out, and like the rest, twirling randomly on rubber through the rapids, then the calm, then the ebb circles back after the rapids, and it takes them all back to the rapids, and they can't help but to do that part again. That part's just before me. I see him. He steers a second time around the ebb to my overhang. He grabs a still green new shoot of me that's almost kissing the river. This makes him still. He waits for his others, and I can stand this, for my shoot is young, flexible, and I am still strong. And in water, he's light and buoyant. So we move back. I'm going to go to still point in a second, but we move back to one more tree in the city. This one was in what's the name of that park? Between Harvard and Bloor, just south of Christie Pitts. So in the old river valley, that's now covered over. Yeah, Bickford Park. Is what it's called? Yeah. My cousins above me are dead. Or I should say, this is a young ash in a small parks, small woods. My cousins above me are dead. A tree can only grow into its future. No longer a sapling, slow death soon. They allow us a few years, the beetles. I have not known their unrelenting emerald pain. And the beetle is just doing what beetles do. So, I forgive. What a life this would have been to have lived. All right, so I'm going to read a couple poems from Still Points. Maureen was reading a lot of rivers and hurricane poems. I have a lot of rivers and hurricane poems here, but that's covered, so just kind of building on the... I was tempted to change my set, and I was like, no, it's fine. Building on the kind of theme of environmental catastrophe. This poem has 5 sections between New Orleans, Detroit, and Toronto. The kind of downfall of Detroit, deindustrialization, depopulation, disinvestments, Hurricane Katrina, which was my senior year in college. This one is called Spill. It's about the BP Gulf oil spill, which is 2010, almost 10 years ago. I was going with my wife, Katrina, who a lot of you know, to Mardi Gras. No, not Mardi Gras, Jazz Fest. And the oil spill happened about the week before Jazz Fest, when I was going to Shorewood, New Orleans for the first time. So I just kind of kept a journal, kind of like a poetic journal, as that whole thing kind of went. So I'll read a selection of that, and kind of the plot lines that punctuated that narrative was the engineers trying to figure out if they can stop this thing, and giving weird names to their like impossible tasks of solving this rift in the bottom of the ocean. The oil well will gush for weeks, if not forever. Unable to rest its leak, it can only spread. Let us weep for its incapacity, beat our dashboards for its inability to halt as we do, loving in spurts. But why harness, why aim love a limitless capacity more? Break the meter, rip up notations, play what you fucking feel and let it leak so it fills the gulf between what's what and what's coming. A new method called the top hat has failed to plug the well. Tar balls on Dauphin Island, cars stalled all over, the gas price jacked up, the rig latched to the Gulf bottom, an invasive shellfish, so low the top hat freezes and clogs, the oil can't come up, can't keep it down. A tanker's there if there's anything to refine. All right, so I'm just going to read a series of these now. There's a few things that might help make this make sense. I'm referring to an oil plume. There was at least some kind of plume. How big it was was unknown, hard to track. But that the oil that came out gathered together naturally and was in this gathering underwater island submarine type thing. So the plume is just a gathering of oil. Corexit is a chemical made by Nelco Corporation. Nelco Corporation was associated with Halliburton, just same Dick Cheney, Halliburton, who was the contractor who laid the foundation of the well, and was partly to blame. Them and BP were kind of blaming each other. So, but Nelco also owned Corexit, which is this really expensive and itself harmful chemical that they use to break up the oil. So it was this they were making money basically off of causing further harm and supposedly trying to fix the problem. I think those are the three that you need. Reports are the escaped crude has formed a great plume below the surface of the Gulf. And not 1 ounce of the pesticides in me wants to enter the plume, but I must. I will offer myself to BP. I am the humble servant of oligarchs and their bystanding shareholders. I will honor the innocence of the 401k and its utter dependence. Now take me to your submarine with the diamond-cutting blades and HD cameras. I will ride its back because it is a whale and the mother of us all. I will be armed with each brackish bead of sweat resting on Shannon Powell's bass drum. I will lace each tear dropped for the drowned with Corexit and give to the plume our grief. For using Corexit, Nelco Company will sue me, claiming copyright infringement, and in settling, I will offer so much more than they ask for, what they could never have, my mortality. And I'll take unto me the horrible eternity of their never-born corporate self. So one more poem from here before I'll finish it off with the final two from Trees Hate Us. This kind of picks up what the last one was. It did eventually end, kind of, maybe. The relief wells are near completion. The spill has been plugged for good. The oil plume's togetherness is in dispute, like a god at the onset of an enlightenment that fails to disprove divinity. Some reports claim the plume is intact, the size of a small Caribbean island. Others claim it's dispersed across the Gulf in single droplets, broken off and coated in Corexit, the soap that slides it off its hole as we are slid off the hinge that turns us together. To go out as one did when he went missing, to search the streets to gather jewels back in, a hand around his bare shoulder, to sit with Rick and his questions, to sit with anyone, to forgive failures and know the people you forgive once barely will need forgiveness again and might not deserve it. One theory claims the Corexit-coated droplets remain in a plume, drawn to each other despite the chemicals meant to divide them. This theory holds that the droplets transcend the lubrication that coats them, that they are deceived, kept from touching, but joined anyways. Friend, we depend on a hinge together. We can take it apart. We can let it break. We can maybe see if it might last. We can be the still point of the turning hinge. All right, so just one last short poem for you. Thank you again for being a great audience. A blast to do this. So the trees did stop talking to me at a certain point, so we're going to come back to that, see what this is kind of like the bookend of it. Voices stop, Toronto winter. All trees sleep through the winter, and the dying hide amid the sleepers. The larvae eat the tissue all summer, then sleep deep in the sleeping wood when winter comes. The killers sleep in the dying, which hide among the sleepers, and dogs pee on the trunks of the dying and of the sleeping. When spring comes, the pupated larvae will emerge as adults. The new larvae will wake hungry and lay into the soft tissues growing below the bark, eating the tree's summer tenderness. But that bad spring is yet to come. No ash is now being eaten, and a fresh powder snow covers the roots of the still alive ash tree. Silence and the city hum strum through all the barest crowns. All right, thank you very much.